All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's keynote speech. Today we have a very distinguished guest, Dr. Mieko Kanno from Sibelius Academy in Helsinki, Finland. Please give her a warm welcome. Dr. Kanno is a violinist and professor of artistic research at Sibelius Academy, and we're very pleased that she's here with us in person this year. She did join us for our online symposium last year, but it's been such a pleasure to meet her and get to know her over these past few days. And Dr. Kanno will also be performing tomorrow evening, I believe. Yes, Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m. in the main hall, a piece for violin and piano. So we have that to look forward to. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kanno, and we look forward to your speech.
Thank you. Thank you for a very kind introduction. And I'd like to thank for the invitation to be here in person this year. It's really nice to see you in person and be here in Bangkok. Also, I'd like to announce that earlier this year, PGVIM and Sibelius Academy signed a memorandum of agreement for a partnership, which is a major step forward in terms of international collaboration and also being able to share learning, both learning and teaching. And so we are very pleased about it. Today, I'm going to talk about a project that I'm carrying out this year, which is still an ongoing project. It's not finished yet. You learn about it. But I'd very much like to share it with you, partly because I'm looking for ideas from you too. So it's called a Postcard project, New Music and I. It was last month or 2 months ago, I sent out this postcard to quite a few people related to a particular music festival in Finland, Uuden Musiikin Lokakuu. And then the postcard goes like this. Dear somebody, I've been given your contact details from the Uuden Musiikin Lokakuu. You may remember me as their guest last year. I am returning to Oulu in October 2022, and for which I have a little project. I am collecting postcards from the composers, musicians, and stakeholders of UML, the festival, to gain an overview of your personal relationship with new music under the title of New Music and I. Contributions can be, but not limited to, a few lines of music composition, preferably written for violin, so that I can play. Some instructions for music making. A short memoir of your most significant experience in new music. A short description of your favorite new music. Or a graphic score. You can write anything you like as long as it fits into a postcard this size. And it is legible without the use of a magnifying glass. The idea is that I will make short performances or improvisations out of a selection of the postcards at the festival UML 2022 in October. Looking forward to receiving your postcard. So I sent it out 2 months ago. And so, what this project is and what it is about. This project brings to public attention personal narratives of musicians, composers, and other stakeholders around the festival Uuden Musiikin Lokakuu in Oulu, Finland. Conceived as a companion initiative and artistic research in association with UML, the project explores the social process of value creation by examining the interaction between new music and the UML community. The project collects postcards from them under the theme of New Music and I, transforms them into musical narratives and interventions, and culminates in a series of short performances during the festival in October 22. It is curated by me, and I lead both part of research and performance. So it's a kind of a package project in that sense. So who is this UML? Now, Uuden Musiikin Lokakuu literally translates as New Music October, so UML for short, is a festival of new music in Oulu, in the northern part of Finland. UML was founded in 2004 by a group of composers and new music enthusiasts in Oulu. The group has formed a society for new music. It has an executive committee led by a chairperson, which appoints executive director to organize the annual festival, and also artistic director every 4th year. So each artistic director holds the position for 4 years. Oulu has traditionally been a stronghold of music and music education in Finland. Where is Oulu then? Just to give you an idea. Now, Oulu is situated roughly exactly the middle of Finland. Then the population is 210,000. In Finland, this is about a middle-sized city. 210,000 feels really small in a sort of Thai scale, but given the country altogether has only 5.5 million people, this is a medium-sized city. It is known for a technologically advanced city with, ever since the 19th century, partly because it's facing the Baltic Sea, and there has been a lot of trade, sea trade, and coal and tar have been their major exports. And in a way, in that sense, quite a wealthy city. And in the 20th century, and particularly in the last 30, 40 years, it's been very progressive as a city, including its education system and its cultural outlook. So I sent the invitation that I read out earlier to altogether about 70 people. So 11 executive committee members, And in society members, just under 40 people. Then the festival volunteers, the people who sell tickets or run with cameras, and then so the people who help out the festival when it takes place in October. And I sent them out in a sort of staggered fashion so that I start receiving little by little rather than all in one go. So far, I sent out the first group. Well, I've actually already sent out all 3 groups. The last one, the festival volunteers, their deadline is still to come, so I haven't got everything yet. But of course, this is a voluntary project that, despite the fact I have set up a deadline, they are not obliged to respect either the deadline or they are not obliged to send me a postcard. It's only if they feel like they are, welcome to do so. So far I received 16 postcards. Not bad. That's my reading of the situation. And they are arriving little by little, really, sort of whenever they feel like. And most of them are sending me emails with an attachment. I've received so far only 3 physical postcards by post. So, something about my motivation, why I wanted to do this project and why I'm doing this project. So I visited the festival last year as their festival guest. And based on my observations from last year, my hypothesis is that the people of the UML community have their own sense of history and ownership about new music, which influences the festival in their current and future shapes. Through this project, I aim to explore this community's sense of ownership about its music-making activities. UML has a strong connection to local music communities and music education, and this project will celebrate it all. In other words, what I find unique about them is that they have this sense of ownership of the festival. The festival is not something that's imposed on them. It's their festival. And they actually talk about the festival as our festival, rather than the festival that the government puts on. And I find that quite interesting, because a lot of festivals, certainly in Finland, but in many other places too, are very much organized somewhere above and implemented for the people on the ground, so to speak. Whereas this festival is very much the ground-up approach to its organization. So I wanted to know what's going on, what are these people, what they are like. And their sense of ownership also shows in the fact that the members of the society can submit their own compositions and make proposals to the festival. So sometimes, the members can have their own pieces performed. And the second point is that, yes, I'm curious about their sense of ownership. Particularly, as I said, Oulu is in many ways a very progressive city. Finland is also generally known for a high standard in school education, and music is an important subject within the curriculum. To the extent that in Finland, despite the fact there are only 5.5 million people, there are some 70 music institutes nationally for high school level education. So music is something the country is really into and investing heavily. So in a way, everyone has knowledge about music. And as you probably know, Finnish musicians, and particularly Finnish composers and Finnish conductors, they are everywhere in the world. And the strength of the education is very much in the earlier part as well, that they are introduced to music and new music quite early on. So that's how it was set up, and I started. And here is the first postcard I received. It was quite a memorable thing for me. And as you can see, this is somebody writing a postcard by hand on an holiday house somewhere on the sort of cool seaside in Finland. And then it's sunny, you can see the shadow of the telephone. And then this is in a way a very typical one, that it's not a real postcard. They sort of roughly measure the size of the postcard and imposed that on an existing printed staves, and then took a photo afterwards and sent it to me. But I want to play it with you, for you. Okay, can you turn down the microphone? Thank you. Thank you. So that was the first postcard. And follow the next one. That was the next postcard. Because in a way, the first postcard was quite a so-called traditional notated music. You know, the material was clear, it was all structured. It was just very short. Whereas this one is actually the postcard writer, or this artist is actually a theater maker. He does music theater, and he sent me a really nice email. And this also came by email attachment. So he made this postcard, took a photo, and sent it to me. He said that he'll give the original to me when I see him in October. And what was nice about this postcard when I received it was that this email text was, he was introducing himself, what he does, and why he is involved in the festival, and his passion about new music. He's worked a long time in Taiwan and then did a lot of music theater there. And he even, gave me an instruction like there is these 4 notes that if I wanted to use it, I could use it, but I don't need to do it, but this is his favorite chord, and so forth. What I find quite interesting is, this kind of conversation that the postcard project is setting up and starting off a series of conversations. And I find that quite nice, because in a much more professionalized, standardized practice in new music, composers write a piece, write an instruction for how to put it together. Whereas because this is much more of a playful thing, a postcard project, they tell me all kinds of things, which is sometimes not always relevant, but at the same time, for me, it's quite instructive to know what kind of people they are and what kind of background they have and why they are involved in new music. So, I'll have a go at this one. So that's one. I have 16 of them, but I'm not going to play all of them, just to introduce you some different types. So the next one is this one, and this is really a sketch in every sense of the word. What I like about it is that nowadays I don't see so many handwriting by anybody be it music or letters or anything. And I myself don't write by hand except my shopping list. And if I do write something, it's usually a signature and my address, occasional Christmas cards, but your birthday cards, nothing more. So I'm kind of quite curious to see other people's handwritings. And also in this case, I don't know if you can see it, they've rubbed out quite a lot of, used an eraser to revise it. Because that's again, nowadays when you press delete, it just completely cleanses up. Whereas, with the pencil thing, you can actually see it, what they wrote underneath. And another interesting thing about this is that this is a collaboration by two composers. It's not just one person writing it. So that's one signature here, and then it's another signature here. Fortissimo isn't a person, by the way, so that's not. And I thought I love the handwriting, but at the same time I can't read everything here. But in some way that's beside the point. If they wanted to write out something very neatly, professionally, they would just use a computer, and then they are perfectly capable people, but they decided to do it this way, sort of, And I kind of want to convey that sense in performing something like this. So I have a go. Right, moving on. Now, so this is here. It says reimagine, react, research, rehearse, read. What is the sound you never heard before? Now, so far, I haven't got a clue what I'm going to do with this. My first thought was that, with this question, what is the sound you've never heard before? How do I know if I've heard all the sounds in the world? I don't know what I don't know, in a way. But also, I thought about, there are lots of sounds I've heard on the internet or on television, that reproductions, mediated sort of sounds. For example, a lot of animal sounds, I can't say I've heard them live real. I think most things, I actually haven't worked out yet what percentage of the sounds I know are actually real and what percentage is actually totally mediated electronically. Because like many of you, I've seen, but I saw you last year, but actually only this year I actually see you real. And in the same way, yes, a lot of animal sounds and then nature sounds, I probably haven't really heard. So, but yes, also because this postcard had this particular shape to it, the choice of color. So I haven't decided what to do with this one, but I wanted to show you. The next one. Oh, there. This one is. It's a series of instruction. It's not very clear, but that's because it's been scanned with the with a very small file. This one is to do, as the title says, postcard improvisation #1, bracket zipper. So, what so far I've decided is to, just detune a bit so that I can get the, use that as a zipper sound. And I think the piece is that I basically follow the instruction. I can probably shape it better than what I'm going to do in the future, but I'll just give you an example how it sounds. Yeah. So start with a scratching sound with the bow, like you are having a broken zipper on your sweater. Yeah. these are the samples. So, observations so far. Each postcard brings in conversations with the postcard writer. And in that sense, the postcard writers participate in the performance-making process because I get into conversations. The second point is that each postcard gives a snapshot of the writer's thought. And in some way, because of its smallness, I'm not asking for a finished composition as such. Sometimes some people write a miniatures, but it doesn't even have to be. It can be just an idea to throw into it. Very much like a photographic snapshot in that sense. But of course, then it comes with the format that not every postcard is a masterpiece. But that's in some way beside the point of the project. The third point is that it is more challenging for non-composers. Clearly, composers have responded much more directly and immediately. For non-composers, it's a little more daunting a task to write a postcard. Although I was expecting more people to send me prose impressions of, oh, I liked that particular concert I attended last year, or something much more personal about it. But at the same time, it appears that a lot of people still find personalizing their experience to be too personal. Somehow the idea of new music is somewhat much more impersonal, or that seems to be the general understanding about new music, or perhaps art music. People seem to think more about what it is rather than what I like about it. So that is just one of the impressions I got so far. Then further on the second page, observations. Notated postcards are generally shorter in duration than other postcards. And perhaps it's because when the more detail, even whether pitch or anything, then the less in length. It's just, you can't fit in very much. But also it says probably something about common practice notation, which is the standard notation. Common practice notation as a language, what kind of duration it has. Because I'm sure you are aware, depending on the language, the amount of things you can say on one page varies. For example, in Finnish language, sentences tend to be longer than the English equivalent. So when people ask you to summarize your project in 200 words or 2,000 characters, what you can say in English is actually more than what you can say. Exactly the same things in Finnish. And so maybe there's something about common practice notation that actually it's quite a dense language in a sense that there is only so much you can say here in terms of average. So that, sorry, then the second point, yes. The last point is that postcard may be outdated. I thought about this, and I'll come back to this point later, because one postcard writer who sent me notated music insisted on sending me the sound file. And well, from my point of view, I said, oh, well, if you like, go ahead. Yes, I'm happy to receive it. But I didn't feel I needed it. But for this postcard writer, the sound file was an important part of the composition, to the extent that this person even revised the notation according to the sound file. And that was the point at which I suddenly thought that, particularly for younger generation of music makers, but for composers from a particular background, or for them, composition is probably slightly different from the notated thing nowadays. And at that point, I suddenly thought, oh, maybe I should have, why didn't I include a submission of a sound file or, a video file? At that point, I suddenly realized, oh, maybe I could have done something different. But that was one of the observations. But I'll come back to this later. So, last year in this symposium, I talked about empathy. And I want to come back to it now, because this project in some way relates to it, or is a part development of the theme. I said last year that music can touch you, but you cannot touch music. By saying this, I discussed that the power of music lies in its intangibility, but this intangibility is often the barrier in communicating and analyzing music communication. The idea of a community often underlies that of empathy, and a community bond often overcomes music's intangibility. In music communication, there is an additional contextual significance that music continues to take place in a world in which sonic skills are used less and less. The second point is that as a way of addressing this challenge in the context of art music, I presented the idea of an interface between musicians and audience in contemporary art music. And I asked, what kind of relationship can we imagine and design between musicians and listeners? This type of interface construction can be described as artistic curation. Curation, or event design, is an increasingly popular practice and profession in the arts. And directing an event with original perspectives is becoming an art form in itself. You may know the practice more with the word entrepreneurship, that every musician is nowadays expected and encouraged to develop that kind of an overview of, and revising the overview of what art can do, what music can do, and what part you can play in it. Lastly, I said empathy requires an equality between the people who experience it. So it's not a hierarchical thing, that people are equal to each other to have that empathetic feelings and understandings. And secondly, it requires effort from them in order to gain a holistic understanding of something that is previously unknown to them. Empathy is something through which to know something you didn't know and have a new understanding. Importantly, empathy isn't about agreeing with that other view. It's about understanding something that is alien to you and acknowledging its existence. And that's kind of, those points are still very much an underlying current for me in conducting this project. So back to the postcard project. I have 4 points, and the first 2 you see here. The first is that culture is not just products and representations, but also practices. In sociology, there is a school of thought in which practical doing of things determines conceptual understanding of them, rather than being the other way around, which is that conceptual understanding of things determining how to do them in practice. These 2 things can go either way. But it is sometimes very hard to see a practice. And that's where intangible culture comes in and its status in the arts world. We are less persuaded to believe that something exists when we can't see it. That is that is a problem for many of us, that we don't believe in something until we see evidence. So, thinking about this postcard project as a practice, each postcard can be seen as a starting point and each performance occasion an end point. How shall I share the journeys from the start to the end? Because it's not just my own journey, it's the postcard writer's journey, but also the whole point of doing this kind of a project is to share the journey with the audience as well. Do I show it in video documentation? Or give more performances? Or give talks like this one? Also, do I show the postcard while I perform it? Is it necessary? Or is it actually hindrance? So that's the sort of questions related to the first point. So the first point is more abstract and conceptual, perhaps. The second point is actually much more practical. Because a postcard is not being necessarily a performance material as such, it's a postcard. I didn't ask for a score or a instruction booklet for a performance as such. I wanted something personal there. As a result, there is some flexibility for performance interpretation that is unique to each postcard. and unique to the postcard as a format. And that is also to say a postcard presents, or each postcard presents some opportunities for mutation for each performance. That performance can be different, not different in each occasion, not in the standard sense of interpretation, but a performance can be representing very different aspects of each postcard. I want to give myself and others a chance to experiment with practical details in such mutation, because I'm interested in not only the notion and existence of a practice, but also in the practical aspect of how different elements can be mapped out and put into relation in the process. In other words, calibration gives me pleasure. Actual doing it and solving practical problems does give me pleasure. So, coming back to the previous question, do I show the postcard while I perform it? Does showing a postcard increase or detract from the enjoyment of its performance in a given environment? Perhaps in some situations and then some depends on the postcard as well. In this kind of a community, showing a notation is okay because you can read it, but that's not granted, not taken to be granted in a normal situation. Let's say if I am to play to my cousins, some of them can read music, but some have no interest, although they like music. And also sometimes it depends on how it is staged. In some cases, if you show pictures or notations, people watch it so much that I become a background noise. So you have to somehow balance it out. It's not necessarily a case that it is good to show or not good to show. We need to see how we can solve the problem in each situation. Next question practical question can be, what is the right duration or speed or pacing between the postcards if played in sequence? At the moment, I'm talking in between the postcards, so you know where one postcard finishes and I move to the next. But if I didn't show it to you, it sort of melts into each other or get a little bit confused. Is it important that demarcate it, or shall I actually elongate each postcard so long that it becomes a sort of a whole CD-like? Because in some cases, the speed is not indicated. You can do anything you like. But it's not so much about anything is possible, but what is the appropriate balance in each occasion? Because at the end of the day, we want the experience to be something enjoyable, and I want to communicate something personal about the postcard writer, and in this case, the community of this new music. Another practical question, do I introduce the author? How much background information is appropriate in each performance context, and in which format? I haven't said anything about the postcard writers here, but when I play it in October in the festival, probably that might be more important than my playing, because they are the stakeholders of the festival. So those are the themes to think about. 2 more points. And then these are much more open questions from which I actually want to lead to discussion. The third point is that can a postcard be concert music? It's been already asked, this question. I'm aware that everyone is busy nowadays. Nobody has extra time, myself included. And therefore, I have no criticism towards anyone asking this question. I sympathize with anyone who comes up with this question. At the same time, somehow looking for a certain quality and being gratified to experience that quality is not what project is designed for. And hence, I mentioned right at the beginning that this is about value creation, finding a new value in a postcard or in a series of postcards. What it is like to be somebody else, what it is like to be this somebody in Oulu, in northern, very cold Finland, to be passionate about new music. Value judgment always comes with musical performance. I'm aware of that, and of course, I would like the experience to be something enjoyable and something good for you. But there are two reasons why I sort of shy away or hesitate from actually answering this question. One is that we know that, I think I mentioned this last year too, that 90% of cultural experience nowadays is at home. Yet 90% of the cultural budget in most countries go to institutions, concert halls, theaters, and orchestras, and established institutions. The supply and demand are not in greatest harmony. Let's put it that way. Knowing that, I want to do something about it in my own way. That's the first reason. The second reason is that, and this is much more speculative, but I'd like to mention it here. The second reason is that I wonder if the concept of art is sufficiently broad enough to capture what is artistic, creative, beautiful, wonderful about human activities. I'm becoming more and more suspicious of this. And I don't want to take away anything about the wonderful things that art offers. I fully appreciate it and I embrace it. At the same time, every now and then I see other things, well, be it craft or some toys or popular music or even ringtones that are actually quite wonderful, but escape the classification of being art or some games too, computer games. And I'm a little bit sort of anxious that are we capturing the right things when we talk about art? So that's sort of part of my thinking on this question, that can a postcard be concert music? And lastly, I want to come back to this idea, that postcard may be outdated. Maybe there are plenty of other formats we can experiment with, and perhaps it's worth thinking about pros and cons in each way, in each medium. I'm not saying that postcards are going away. It may be, coming back very soon as a retro thing. But as I said, that when I came across this particular postcard writer who insisted on my receiving the sound file and listening to it, yes, these things are now happening. I think I talked long enough. And so with these questions, discussion points, I'd like to open it up to a general discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kanno, for such a delightful presentation and with your musical examples as well. So we would really like to invite some of our students to offer any insights on some of these questions, especially our string students. If you would like to share something, please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Kanno, for the presentation. Each postcard also has a beautiful story and interesting story by itself already, but it could be seen as we put postcard together, we put in any order, we matching this postcard, like grouping them. So, in that way, that is. In that way, does it decrease the authorship of its postcard, like a collage thing, or like if it decrease the authorship of each postcard, how do you consider to do it like a collage without losing the authorship of each postcard? Thank you.
Thank you for an interesting question. I'm still thinking about it, and in fact, I'd like to turn the question the other way around, because there are composers here. And not only composers, but imagine yourself writing a postcard and sending it to me. And how would you like me to present your postcard? Would you like your name to be stamped, recognized, copyrighted? Yeah, and I still have to discuss it with the festival people first. How they want to, other festival, how they want to present. And I suppose if I show the postcard, as you saw, most people actually put a signature on it or the name. I didn't ask for it, but most people, wrote out both the signature as well as printed out name, which I found quite interesting. Would I have done that? Probably yes. Yeah, so yes, answering your question, I haven't thought about it yet because, it's a small community, and I think there are some friends as well as not so very good friends as well. And if it is good friends together, maybe it's okay, but if I mix them, they may not be happy. but I don't know that side yet.
Thank you for this question. I think that's very interesting. Also thinking about how different music can come together in a scenario like this, even if there are people who do not get along or something, but they can be unified through this project and through the music. Yeah. And then also if we think about the earliest music, composers were not writing their names on it either. Like very, very early medieval music, they're all anonymous. It's just music that exists. And if we think of traditional music as well, nobody put their name on it. So this practice of the composer having ownership over the piece is a specific kind of ideology. So I think this is a good moment to question that. And also,
that's a good point, indeed.
Something. I mean, I'm just wondering. Like, it reminds me of like maybe the students might not know this practice, but when you give someone a birthday card or a New Year's card, then you always sign. So I think some people might consider this as a gift to you, a musician. Then the idea of ownership is completely different.
Yes, that's the dedication. Yes, that's sort of to Mieko with friendship, Maria. Yes, and the dedicated to Mieko. Yes. Yeah, it's very much still a postcard in many ways that you sign. Yes.
It's a share already.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Very intriguing project and very clever, I should say. I have two questions. One, in reference to the value judgment that you pointed out. In specifying in your letter that you're looking for new music, don't you think you have already disenfranchised a whole group of people? If you could just have said, send me any kind of music, and it will turn out new music anyway based on your interpretation. That's one. The second is, what happens if the postcard writer demands compensation? Since I suppose you will be compensated by the festival, and so this is some sort of a commission. Wouldn't it be seen that way? Thank you.
Yeah. Very good questions. The first one, yes, in some way I'm already disfranchising, that's true. In the context of New Music Festival, I think that's part of it, because it's a new music festival and I wanted to see this new music and I, as opposed to music and I.
Or it could be not music. Send me a sound map or something.
Yes, yeah, that would be sort of, send me something. Yeah, send me something out of which I can do something with the skills I have. That could be an interesting project too. As for the second point, I'm still sort of half awaiting how to deal with the nitty-gritty practicality of that aspect, because if I played them, the postcard writers are entitled to receive performance rights income if the postcard writer is a registered person as a composer. Yes. I've been told that there are ways to deal with it, don't worry, but exactly how is yet to be seen, because quite a few of them are actually well-established practitioners. So, yes.
Ordinary persons don't get anything if they're not registered.
It's an unfair world, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, and I also, quite a separate project from this, I interviewed composers in Finland for some education survey last year. And we actually only shortlisted composers to interview who are listed in the Finnish Composer Society's register. At the same time, we made a disclaimer saying that that's what we are doing here, but we are also aware there are many music makers, songwriters in particular, who are not registering themselves as composers because they don't consider themselves as such. The Finnish Society for Composers is a classical music thing, although it doesn't say anywhere on the website. But that's how it is understood, and I think that exists in quite a few countries still. The borderline, or if there is any borderline, the difference between so-called art music and non-art music, or music in general, the borders are breaking down. And perhaps never existed. It's just we artificially created this thing called art music in the last 300, 400 years. But particularly with the development of electronic music, and particularly the kind of accessible music on the phone, that nowadays anyone can compose music. So the whole discipline of composition is changing. And together with that change, this idea and our understanding of what art music is also changing. And that's, you know, a real development. And certainly I myself am still behind understanding the implications, such as this, you know, what to deal with copyright authorship. Who owns it conceptually but practically, legally? So yes.
Yes, thank you for these questions. It's very thought-provoking, and also it's very important to think about this aspect as well, because that is the reality that we deal with as professional musicians. But what I really appreciate about this project is that it seems that you're searching for something that goes beyond that, and we're looking for connections, something that, going back to the source of music as something that has the power to touch and make people feel connected. And so, of course, when we have to think about the legal issues and things like this, then sometimes it kind of brings our focus away from what we truly believe is valuable in music. So I really appreciate what this project is trying to do. And if I may turn the question a little bit about something a little bit more practical, I'm wondering, since you have this slide up, how you make decisions when you have to interpret a postcard like this. How do you decide what to play?
It's a little bit like how I decide what to eat. It depends on what I've eaten yesterday and what I'm likely to be eating next week. And then, yeah, pick out what I like or what I feel like. Yeah, and sometimes I change from here and there. There are certain material, I mean, like any improvisation, there are certain preconceived materials you identify, and there are certain others you keep open, but also at the same time being aware of, you know, how long it can go or how short it needs to be. Yeah, yes.
Do you have any suggestions for young musicians who might felt that they didn't actually have the choice and they can't make decision for themselves because they are afraid of certain things. Can you give us a little bit of advice of whether do we really have a choice? Can we really make our own decision?
Yes, yes, you can, because I think the default position is such that even when you think you are not making your personal decisions, you already are making personal decisions. You can't avoid it, and that's the reality. Whether you take those given situations as given or your choice is probably the question. Now, this may actually deviate a little bit from the topic I was talking about, but when I was a student in Guildhall School in London, I had this thing this idea that, I said to my teacher that I wish I was a violinist of that type, and then I said so and so as references, because if I was that type of a violinist, I could play that kind of music or this kind of music in this particular style. I don't have those facilities. And we were not talking about technical facilities in that sense. It was more of a temperamental things. And he answered, that was Ifra Neiman, who died 20 years ago now. And he said, everyone is different. Some people are born with blue eyes, blonde. Some are born with black eyes and black hair. Everyone is different. You make most of what you have. And that is not condemnation. Don't get disappointed about what you have. Be grateful. Well, he didn't say that because he said it in such a nice way that I still remember today, that he said, you have what you have, and make most of what you have. It's as if you've chosen those characteristics you have. Those are not given things. They are given, but at the same time, make something positive out of it. So, in my case, yes, I'm still relatively small in height. Nowadays I've gone grey, but I used to have black hair, and for a long time I always looked younger than my age. Even when I became 40, I was sometimes asked for an identification, for ID, to buy alcohol. That enraged me. At the age of 40, why do you have to walk around with your ID to show that you can buy some wine? But nobody took me seriously. Most people said, how lucky you are. For me, it was I didn't want to have this problem. But then, at the same time, calm down. It's good that I'm seen young. Although I may not be able to buy alcohol everywhere, that's okay. At least I can get food. And in that kind of a sense, we all, okay, that's a really trivial example, I admit. But it's kind of learning to be grateful for what each one of us has and take it as if, and indeed, as something we've chosen to be what we are. just sort of try to, that flip the switch. That you are not playing the way your teacher asked you to play. You've made a choice to do it. You are on stage, you are alone, you are making that choice. You need to believe in that, because otherwise it won't communicate. So, okay, that's slightly beside the point, but if I may come back to the main point, in a way, choice is everywhere around you. Even when you don't want it, you have to choose. And think positively about it. You have so many things to choose from, which pieces to play, how to play. Even if you are given a certain instruction or historical style in which to play, you still have many, many, many options. And enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your beautiful words. Yes, I think it's very encouraging to us all, this idea of being humble to accept what we are given, but also to take responsibility after we accept that, to take responsibility for the gifts that we are given and to really make something out of it. And I think your project is just such an embodiment of that, that you receive these postcards and then you're making something out of it yourself, and it's something personal, but it's something that also engages dialogue with your collaborators. So thank you so much for an inspiring presentation and talk today. And yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.